The cosmic winds are undeniably shifting in your favor, and a profound transformation is underway. Everyone around you is beginning to witness a truth so radiant and glaring that denying it is no longer an option. The veil has lifted. People are starting to see that you were never the issue. In fact, they're growing exhausted just hearing your name come up repeatedly, especially from the very person who caused the chaos in the first place. Your unwavering consistency cut through their lies like lightning slicing through the darkest storm. Month after month, year after year, while others unraveled in their own deceit, you held firm. You remained grounded while the whirlwind of drama spun wildly around you. Your character, tested repeatedly, never cracked, never bent, never gave in, no matter how calculated and precise the pressure they applied. The unfolding truth. Observers of this spiritual saga slowly began connecting the dots. Once they did, the pattern was too clear to ignore. You kept showing up with the same presence, the same energy, the same integrity. Day after day, your values didn't just remain. They became pillars standing strong, even when your world trembled from the artificial earthquakes they tried to manufacture. Through every provocation meant to make you break, you chose peace. While their narratives twisted like tornadoes, your truth stood like a mountain, unmoved by storm winds. And people noticed. They started whispering amongst themselves how you never retaliated, how you never stooped to their level. You simply continued being yourself, unmoved and undisturbed by the games being played around you. The universe builds your case. In doing so, the universe began building your case. Every moment you chose silence over shouting, every time you walked away instead of lashing out, every breath of dignity you took while surrounded by intentional chaos became powerful evidence. You were standing in a cosmic courtroom, and the universe was documenting it all, every response, every choice, with divine precision. Your ability to stay grounded while storms raged became the very proof that cleared your name without you needing to speak a single word in defense. The mountain of truth grew so high that questioning your character became not only illogical, but cosmically impossible. Eventually, people began to realize the deeper force at play. They started to recognize the supernatural strength behind your calm, the divine protection within your stillness, and the higher calling that explained how you managed to maintain such peace under relentless attack. They soon realized they were watching something extraordinary. Your unwavering calm in the middle of a storm radiated a depth of strength they couldn't grasp, but were compelled to respect. Your name became the soundtrack looping in their minds, a relentless chorus they couldn't silence. The obsession revealed. Like a high-powered satellite locked onto a single target, they tracked every move you made. Each breath, each step, each unguarded smile became their business. The fixation grew so intense that even casual bystanders felt uneasy. Some of them could quote your daily routine more accurately than your own family, monitoring your social media with the diligence of a seasoned investigator. Every post, every photograph, every friendship was dissected with a disturbing fervor that laid bare the unhealthy magnitude of their psychological attachment. Such obsessive surveillance couldn't stay hidden. People in their orbit began asking pointed questions. Why are they still so consumed by someone who's clearly moved on? The obsession became the elephant that followed them into every room. Your quiet composure only amplified the contrast. While you embodied serenity, they seemed incapable of releasing their grip on your existence. Friends and relatives grew weary of conversations that inevitably veered back to you like a faulty compass locked on magnetic north. Eventually, the cosmic spotlight pivoted from you to them. Under that glare, their behavior stood exposed. The depth of their fixation signaled something profoundly troubling in both mind and spirit. No longer could they wrap it in excuses or casual remarks. The red flag of obsession waved plainly for all to see, costing them the allies they'd counted on. Your silence, your testimony. Meanwhile, your silence became your greatest testimony. Onlookers recognized that your lack of elaborate defenses wasn't an admission of guilt, but a declaration of inner certainty. A person with nothing to hide has no need to weave counter-narratives. As they spiraled deeper into their own preoccupation, your steady calm emerged as the clearest evidence of innocence, leaving everyone to wonder how they had ever doubted you in the first place. The collapse of their narrative. Your silence spoke volumes. You understood the truth would surface on its own, and time has proven that cosmic patience entirely justified. Once people began examining the accusations with clear eyes instead of raw emotion, the shaky foundation beneath those claims turned to quicksand. Timelines fell apart when checked against reality. Motives unraveled under basic logic, and supposed evidence evaporated like morning mist beneath a rising sun. Discrepancies piled up. Details shifted from audience to audience. Emotions looked staged upon closer inspection, and the story itself seemed to morph any time a sympathetic ear was needed. Listeners noticed the same incident sounded wildly different, depending on what reaction they were trying to stir. Those inconsistencies cracked their credibility wide open. Truth carries a frequency that resonates in ways lies never can, and collective intuition began detecting the disharmony. The cosmic dissonance between their words and lived reality became audible to anyone tuned in spiritually. Their narrative, already wobbling, collapsed under the weight of contradiction. They painted you as vindictive, yet you chose forgiveness over retaliation. They called you manipulative, while you stayed transparently honest, even when it cost you. They labeled you problematic, though anyone who engaged with you directly encountered peace, clarity, and genuine connection. The gap between their caricature and your real-life energy grew impossible to ignore. One by one, every person who met you walked away with a completely different impression than the slander they'd been fed, leaving no doubt where the true discord originated. They had been spoon-fed distortions through a relentless gossip network, but your genuine nature pierced through in every interaction, every heartfelt conversation, every sincere moment of connection. People began comparing their own experiences with you against the rumors they'd absorbed, and the contrast hit hard. It created a wave of cognitive dissonance. How could someone so grounded and peaceful in person be the same villain described in hushed whispers? This glaring contradiction forced many to question the story they had accepted. Were they going to trust their own experience, or the secondhand drama passed around like spiritual currency? What stood out most was your unwavering authenticity. Your consistent energy across various environments and relationships created a pattern that simply couldn't be dismissed as fake or manipulative. Over time, people started waking up to the truth. Someone genuinely problematic couldn't sustain that kind of emotional and spiritual clarity for so long across so many contexts. The stagnation of their bitterness. Meanwhile, the narrative from your critics became repetitive, like a cosmic broken record stuck on the same bitter refrain. The same tired grievances were rehashed over and over, told with the same dramatic flair as if they had just occurred, even though years had passed. The emotional pitch never changed, and soon it began to wear thin. People started recognizing the heavy energy surrounding that obsession. Every conversation felt like being pulled into a vortex of negativity, draining the joy and presence from the moment. It became painfully obvious. Interacting with them left others feeling emotionally depleted, as if caught in a never-ending loop of old wounds and resentments. Their complaints became toxic background noise, saturating their presence with a heaviness that repelled even the most patient friends. The universe, too, seemed to lose tolerance for their refusal to grow or let go. As their energy stagnated, people naturally pulled away. They no longer wanted to be part of the loop, no longer had the bandwidth for the emotional exhaustion that came with every interaction. What once sounded like legitimate concerns began to lose all weight. The repetition made their grievances seem less like cries for justice and more like an inability to move on. Their emotional and spiritual rigidity started raising questions about their mental well-being. It was no longer about what you did. It became a reflection of what they couldn't let go. And that, more than anything, exposed the true root of the problem. Allies desert the cause. Those who'd originally taken sides soon began asking pointed questions, queries that stripped away vague insinuations and demanded concrete facts. And that's where the entire storyline unraveled. Whenever anyone pressed for specific examples of what you'd supposedly done, the accusations shrank into obvious exaggerations or dissolved into empty air. Recruited allies started feeling duped, realizing they'd been swept into a conflict with no solid foundation. Even the flying monkeys who had gladly carried the gossip now questioned their own mission. They couldn't justify their involvement without sounding petty or irrational. Under neutral scrutiny, the narrative simply collapsed. Embarrassment set in. Former supporters experienced a rude awakening as they recognized they'd been weaponized against someone innocent. Shame outweighed loyalty, and one by one, they withdrew, leaving the primary instigator increasingly isolated. Their desertion triggered a domino effect. If the claims had any merit, why were all the allies abandoning ship? The mass exodus became yet more proof that the accusations were hollow. Your ascension. Meanwhile, you kept evolving. While they remained frozen in resentment like insects trapped in cosmic amber, you advanced toward your goals, crafting a life rich with peace and purpose. Months slid into years, and observers couldn't ignore the difference. You flourished like a garden after rainfall. They withered in bitterness, refusing the water of healing. Your forward motion only magnified their stagnation, making the contrast glaringly obvious to anyone with spiritual sight. People realized that those genuinely wounded eventually heal and move forward, whereas those obsessed with control stay anchored in perpetual victimhood. Your ability to transmute pain into wisdom and conflict into peace showcased profound spiritual maturity. It stood in stark opposition to their inability to release past hurts. Divine protection. Even those who trafficked in darker agendas started to back away, admitting, "Every time we try to move against them, it backfires worse on us." In the end, your steady ascension highlighted an eternal truth. Growth is the most powerful rebuttal to those trapped in their own cycles of grievance. Word quickly spread that you carry a shield of divine protection so potent that any negative spiritual work aimed at you doesn't merely fail, it ricochets and harms the very practitioners who attempted it. In the more esoteric circles where such matters are quietly discussed, your name now inspires cautionary tales. Seasoned workers in these realms warn one another. Steer clear of anyone surrounded by that level of cosmic backing. The repeated backfires became legendary, forging a reputation that precedes you in places most people never even acknowledge. Soon, some of the so-called spiritual mercenaries began turning down well-paid assignments targeting you because no fee could compensate for the backlash they'd face. Your energetic field became so notorious that merely mentioning your name in these gatherings prompted immediate refusals and whispered warnings. Even skeptics could no longer deny the pattern. Every attempt to harm you resulted in consequences that extended beyond the initial caster, rippling out to anyone connected to the scheme. Mathematically, the odds of such failures being coincidence were impossible to calculate, forcing acknowledgement that a higher order was at play. A collective plea. Let go. Eventually, voices of reason, friends, family, even former allies, formed a chorus urging the instigator to let go. Move on with your life. Stop bringing them up in every conversation, they pleaded. Those who loved them most grew exhausted by the same grievances rehashed with ritual devotion, recognizing how the obsession drained their mental and spiritual health. Conversations became minefields. Everyone tiptoed around to avoid triggering yet another rant, while even the most loyal supporters reached their limit with the unending negativity. What began as a conflict over perceived wrongs evolved into a glaring display of imbalance. The supposed target thrived under divine shelter, while the aggressor was consumed by an unhealthy fixation. One by one, people distanced themselves, realizing that the obsession itself had become far more destructive than the original grievance ever was. This universal message of release didn't arrive through a single conversation or isolated event. It came through a rising tide of voices, one after another, from sources they never expected. These weren't biased allies or uninformed outsiders. These were friends, mentors, family members, even spiritual advisors, people they trusted, each echoing the same concern with growing urgency. And when that many people with no connection to each other begin delivering the same message in harmony, it becomes impossible to chalk it up to coincidence. That is divine orchestration. The universe was speaking clearly, using many vessels to communicate one undeniable truth. It's time to let go. Their inability to do so didn't just raise concern, it became the central issue. The more they resisted healing, the more obvious it became that the real dysfunction didn't originate from the situation itself, but from their refusal to move forward. You, on the other hand, embodied growth. While they clung to old wounds like trophies, you walked through fire, transformed your pain into wisdom, and rose into new realms of peace. You weren't just surviving, you were thriving. And in that contrast, the true story revealed itself to everyone watching. The power of time. At first, some people were unsure. They wanted to believe both sides had valid pain, but time has a way of making the truth louder. Over weeks, months, and eventually years, something became impossible to ignore. You had continued on your path, seeking healing, evolving in mind, body, and spirit. They, however, remained anchored to the same grievances, the same storyline, the same self-created loop of victimhood. And eventually, the emotional landscape around them began to shift. What once elicited sympathy now evoked discomfort. What once seemed like righteous anger now looked like obsession. People began to see that while you had taken accountability and surrendered to healing, they had become addicted to conflict. What once appeared as a cry for justice now revealed itself as a cry for control. Their refusal to accept closure no longer looked like emotional struggle. It looked like spiritual resistance. The same people who had once stood beside them started stepping away, not because they chose sides, but because they chose peace. They were spiritually tired, energetically drained. Every conversation became another round in a battle that no one else wanted to fight anymore. Meanwhile, your presence became a living testimony to what healing truly looks like. You didn't need to announce your growth. It radiated from you. In your calm, people felt safety. In your energy, they sensed alignment. In your silence, they heard truth. And as more and more people encountered you, experienced your peace, and felt your authenticity, the falsehoods collapsed under their own weight. The story they told no longer matched who you clearly are. The energy simply didn't align, and energy doesn't lie. What's most powerful is that your vindication didn't come from exposing them. It came from being you, fully, freely, fearlessly. The truth revealed itself through the timeline of your transformation. You didn't retaliate because you didn't need to. The universe took care of what you surrendered. Every lie told about you now hangs in the air, unsupported, abandoned even by the people who once repeated it. Because those people too have had their own realizations. The cosmic truth always rises. It may be delayed, but it is never denied. Even those who opposed you, who once saw you through the filter of someone else's pain, now admit to themselves, even if silently, that you were never the villain. You were the mirror. The truth they couldn't control, the peace they couldn't disrupt, the calm they couldn't understand. You became the example of what happens when someone truly chooses healing. When someone refuses to live in the identity of pain. And now your vindication rings through the collective. Every conversation where your name is spoken with respect, every realization someone has about your true character, every moment of clarity that breaks through the illusion. This is divine timing at work. The universe has coordinated these awakenings with precise spiritual alignment, orchestrating a collective recognition that transcends personal bias or old allegiances. Even those who once entertained the lies now sit in quiet awe, realizing that you were not only innocent, you were anointed. Your enemies didn't argue because they had truth. They argued because they had no peace. They couldn't ignore you. They couldn't defeat you. And most painfully for them, they couldn't be you. That inability to match your energy became their downfall. And while they spiraled in obsession, you rose in silence. While they screamed for attention, you whispered prayers of surrender. While they sought validation, you embodied truth. Now the verdict has been spoken, not by one voice, but by many. Not from your lips, but from the cosmic alignment of timing, clarity, and truth. The scales have balanced themselves, not through destruction, but through divine order. You were never the storm, you were the shelter, never the chaos. You were the calm, never the enemy. You were the assignment they failed to understand. And in failing to understand, they revealed themselves. The world is watching now, but more importantly, the universe has spoken, and the judgment is clear. You were never the problem. You were always the peace they couldn't destroy, the light they couldn't dim, and the truth they could never bury, no matter how deep they tried. Your vindication has arrived, not through revenge, but through the quiet power of becoming everything they said you could never be. If this message spoke to your heart, I invite you to gently tap like, share it with someone who may need it, and consider subscribing to join this growing soul family. And if you feel led, you're always welcome to join the channel for deeper connection and support.